Hey everyone, it's Pitika from Daydream Nation and welcoming back a long-lost friend to the channel, Mr. Joe B. How are you, mate?
I've been the hell and back, but I'm okay.
You have indeed.
I've been telling you what's going on. Holy cow.
Wow.
Hurricanes, family deaths.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you for having me on finally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So today's episode, we are going to talk about Aerosmith. So this is a show that we planned a number of months ago. We were going to do it to coincide with the news that Aerosmith were calling it a day. So what we're going to do today is going to talk about our 5 favorite Aerosmith songs, and then we're going to have a little bit of a chat, and Joe's going to talk about what this band means to him and his what are his emotions in regards to the band calling it a day. Is it sadness, loss, maybe long overdue? Just see how you feel as an Uber fan about Aerosmith. That's it.
Yeah.
So why don't we just start off with talking about our favorite songs. So 5 favorite songs. Start it
Yeah.
off.
So I'm going to have to lay some parameters because full disclosure, the first 4 Aerosmith albums, well, maybe, Draw the Line, I think is overrated. It was a downer for me, but the first 4 is the greatest rock and roll ever made. Aerosmith Rocks is the greatest album that was ever made. That's my opinion. So I can go every song in Aerosmith Rocks. So I put some parameters where I'm going to have to choose one song off of an album. And my number 5 is Draw the Line, which is a fantastic song. Also, I'm going to just pick from the first early albums. I can't, they're not saying that I don't like things on Pump. I think we did a show about Pump in the past or Permanent Vacation or something. There's good stuff there. Yeah, there's good stuff there, but the early albums are it for me. So Draw the Line's number 5 for me. It's a fantastic song. Honestly, I think it's an overrated album. I think there's some revisionist history out there. I still can't listen to the entire album and enjoy it, especially comparing it to the albums that preceded it, because there were a lot of drugs going on there, a lot of band friction. They weren't even talking to each other while they were recording the album. I think they were in a castle in upstate New York or Connecticut, and Joe Perry was locked up in a room, not talking to the rest of the band, doing drugs. And it shows on a lot of this album. But Draw the Line is an awesome song. It's great. And that's my number 5. I love it. But it was a letdown after Rocks, because as I said, Rocks is that's my number 1 album of all time. Any band. Yeah.
Well, I feel your passion for it, so that's why I got you on the show. I'm going to put Dream On. I think that's a great, it's kind of one of the early power ballad songs. Still gets played on radio today. I like how it's got that really delicate guitar build-up, classical chord progression, but like Steve Tyler's voice sounds so pure. He's got this great vibrato, and it just goes into builds up into a scream. It's got so much power. So, this is Aerosmith really announcing themselves to the world. Now, down under, we're a little bit, we got onto the Aerosmith train much later, and we got on around Permanent Vacation, and Pump was huge, and then all the radio hits from there. We kind of discovered the catalog reverse engineering. So we got into Pump and then went backwards.
I think the majority of the people in the States too. There were like diehards like us, and we went to they had these big World Series of Rock shows that I actually didn't go to, and they were messed up, and they had the Blue Army and everything. But yeah, they became a super group with Permanent Vacation. And what you describe, I believe, I would say definitely 80%, possibly 90% of the Aerosmith fans out there go along the same path that you described in Australia. And I'm talking about the United States. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right, what's your number 2 pick?
So I absolutely love Night in the Ruts. I thought that was a comeback from Draw the Line. And Bone to Bone, Coney Island, Whitefish Boy is probably my favorite song on there. Joe Perry played it on his recent solo tour, which blew me away. I saw them last year. It's just a kick-ass song, and it's one of the last songs Joe wrote with them before he departed and before Brad Whitford departed. And I just absolutely love it. Again, it's hard to pick one song off that album. Like Cheesecake is so cool. There's no there's one song. I was talking to Tim Derling about it. Let me go back. Let me go to the album right now. Chiquita. We cannot for the life of us figure out how to play that on a guitar because it's so bizarre, but it's so awesome. But out of those songs, Bone to Bone, Coney Island Whitefish Boy is my favorite tune.
Well, you must be reading my notes, mate, because that's my number two.
There you go.
Night in the Ruts is probably one of my favorite Aerosmith albums. It's right up there. Criminally underrated, isn't it, mate? Really?
Definitely.
It should be.
So when I saw Joe Perry, he played only stuff off the first 5 albums.
Yep.
Plus his solo stuff and some blues stuff and a tribute to Jeff Beck. And I was blown away. And we'll get into the band but Gary Sharon was singing and he was awesome. We'll get into all that later. But anyway, there was one point during the show and he's tuning his guitar and it's like, he did this before SOS too. And it's like, it's just like it's super heavy. And then he goes in, I'm like, no way he's playing Bone to Bone. I thought I would never, ever see that song again live. And he played it. So it was awesome.
It's got so much groove and it's right in the pocket and it's got this infectious riff, you know?
Yes.
I think it's the best song on the album.
I'm picking it.
It was so disruptive, those sessions. Like, Joe left the sessions halfway through.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think it's a miracle that in 1979 they got an album of such high quality, but it kind of tanked. And that was like the beginning of the end of that little phase of Aerosmith, didn't it?
I mean, it sold fairly well, but there was definitely
a step down.
It was a step down in the popularity of the big American hard rock bands. Martin Popoff has talked about this. I had an episode with him about this. There was a Cream magazine out, or Circus magazine. I have the cover. It was called The Death of Heavy Metal. And this was 1980, 1979. Some of it was true. So you had, the big band like Aerosmith, not AC/DC. AC/DC saved everything. It was Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Kiss. They're all plummeting at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So that's our number 2. Number 3. What's your third pick?
My number 3, again, Toys in the Attic. It's hard to pick one song. But my absolute favorite song on Toys in the Attic is No More, No More. It just blows me away. And he has he has a strange guitar tuning on it. At first I thought it was tuned standard, but it's not. But that song still really grabs me. And occasionally they would throw it out to us diehards and play it live on the last few tours. And it was amazing. It's by far my favorite song on that album. It's hard. Everybody says, why do I like Rocks more than Toys in the Attic? And I think there's a couple Walk This Way is a great tune, but it got overplayed. Sweet Emotion is a fantastic, amazing song. A little bit overplayed. I think Big 10-inch record is the one thing that really sets it. I'm not a fan of it, but man, No More, No More is just amazing. Playing on my baby's daddy, baby grand. Still, I started this band. Steven Tyler's lyrics, just amazing. Toys in the Attic. If you read Walk This Way, Tom Hamilton, when they did Get Your Wings, Bob Ezrin and it was Jack Douglas, but Bob Ezrin kind of had his hands in Get Your Wings, and they really ripped into him as a bass player. And Tom Hamilton went to work and practiced and practiced and practiced, and you can tell. I mean, the bass riffs and everything from Toys in the Attic on, he became one of the rock and roll's greatest bass players. And he took it up to another level on Toys in the Attic. But No More, No More is my favorite song in that album.
That's an interesting idea for a future episode about musicians that improved in the studio.
Yeah.
Or force, because there's so many stories about musos that come into recording an album, and they've had drummers have had to play to a click track, or they've had to get replacement session drummers in, and they've basically had to learn their craft while the rest of the band is recording. So that's a really interesting story. That's an interesting little rabbit hole to go down.
Yes.
Toys in the Attic. I love that album. Sweet Emotion. I'm going to pick it. It's a radio-friendly favorite on classic rock to this day. I think it's interesting that it was a lyric that was inspired by Steve Tyler's hatred for Joe Perry's first wife.
Yes.
There's a lot of... The dynamics of this band are very interesting. It's almost Journey-esque, isn't it? The ins and outs. Tom Hamilton came up with a killer bass line. It came out of a jam session. And I think it's just the signature Aerosmith riff. The bridge is as hard-hitting as hell. I think it's a great song. And it's kind of iconic.
You can't get wrong with anything on the first 4, 5, 6 albums.
Yep.
Even Rockin' the Hard Place has some great stuff on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, next pick.
So my next pick would definitely be my solid number 2 Aerosmith song. I love it. It's Seasons of Wither off of Get Your Wings. It's a mellow tune written solely by Steven Tyler. I learned how to play it on guitar. I just think it is one of the most perfect songs ever written. I absolutely love it. Now, if we were talking, Lord of the Thighs is also one of my favorite, but the live version of Lord of the Thighs blows away the version on Get Your Wings. But Seasons of Wither is just a perfect song. And the way the intro, because Train Kept a Rollin' goes into it, and they go into that live bit, and which, by the way, Joe Perry doesn't play lead guitar in that song. It's Dick Wagner. That was Bob Ezrin getting his ghost musicians in. But the way it's haunting and then goes into Seasons of Wither with the acoustic guitar riff that Steven Tyler is a musical genius. And you read about in the Walk This Way book how there was a lot of push and pull because Steven was a classically trained musician and is just an all-around genius. And Joe and the other guys Brad went to Berkeley, so he was classically trained as well. But the other guys, so there was a lot of push and pull as far as musical structure and reading music, but it worked. The tension worked, definitely, and there's a lot of tension.
Sometimes tension can be healthy, and good artistry comes out of it. So I think it's just made for the band. But I think
Seasons of Wither is hands down my number 2 song.
Yeah,
hands down. Yeah,
but you'd have to say that the drug substance abuse that probably had a heavy toll on the band, especially in the 70s. I've heard some nightmare stories about live.
Let me tell you something.
Live, they were just absolutely really shabby.
When they put out great albums, they were horrible live. I mean, I saw them once with Steven. I don't know how he stood.
What year? What year?
So when 1983 on Rockin' the Hard Place tour, he was
right.
Yeah.
What was the first concert you saw with Aerosmith? What year?
That was my first Aerosmith. Yeah,
right.
But I mean, I had a cousin who would go to shows before me, and they would have these World Series of Rock shows and Aerosmith would be headlining half of them, and I'd be like, "How was Aerosmith?" And he'd be like, "They sucked." He goes, "They were so wasted they could barely play." I'm like, "Get out!" But he goes, "Do you know what? There was this band that came on first from Australia called AC/DC, and they blew everyone away." That's the one thing I remember about it. But yeah, Aerosmith, when they put out great albums live, I mean, you can look at Houston 77. It's a great show, but they are messed up. Steven Tyler literally goes to the drum riser and does a line off the drum riser and then takes a swig of whiskey during Lord of the Thighs. Just look it up. The Summit, Houston, 1977. Yeah.
Well, they say that they can't remember half
had a
of the
punk
shows.
rock quality to it, which was kind of cool, but yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the versions of songs are very sped up, aren't they?
Yes.
They're really...
And
really
Joe's
aggressive.
a mess. I mean, honestly, Steven carried a lot of the weight, even though he's doing a lot of drugs. But he's, no one was doing background vocals in the mid 70s, late 70s. Brad Whitford, I think, is a better guitar player structurally. He classically trained. You'll see that a lot on the when they reformed on that night. Was that Done with Mirrors tour or the Back in the Saddle tour? Brad really carries a lot of the heavy lifting. Joe really picked up his game guitar wise, but in those early times, Joe was if you watch that '77 show, the first night, I think he's got his back to the audience almost the entire show. It's yeah. And Steven's yelling at him, and there's a lot of tension.
And absolutely, and because they were so screwed up on substances, they didn't really have a world domination plan, did they? There was no. They were just doing America, but they could have dominated the world, and got their shit together, toured Europe and spread the word.
In Walk This Way and on Behind the Music, they talk about how they blew all their money on drugs. Like Steven Tyler's on record saying, my airplane, my mansion went off my nose. But he also came back years later, and I find this to be what happened to bands like all these 70s bands, Black Sabbath, Aerosmith. I think these managers like Lieber Krebs and these guys, they just gave these guys cars, houses, drugs, but nothing in their bank account.
They skimmed the top up.
Yeah. And then when they finally got clean, they realized even Nugent was clean and he got screwed, and they finally realized,
This is an ongoing investigative report from Joe B. Watch out. I mean, this is one of your favorite topics. So I'm really looking forward to the expose, a show we could go down this path, because there's a litany of carcasses of rock stars that are just fallen out with their managers and being ripped off.
And the managers the managers get a cut of the royalties. Like, why are Lieber Krebs getting money for songs that Steven Tyler and Joe Perry wrote, right? It's just, it's craziness. In Van Halen, same thing happened with them. At Maynard, so I'm going way off here, but I just heard an interview with Maynard from Tool, and Maynard they got to the Sunset Strip after the fact. And he had a guy come up to him and said, whenever someone tells you you're great and you're this and that, he goes, they're really saying you're naive and stupid. And they took that approach, and he said, I'm not taking any shit from these managers. And that's how Tool, right off the bat, made money and have money. They have money in their bank accounts, and they weren't screwed by management. So,
yeah. Well, it's an interesting rabbit hole for sure. Because you've got to face it, a lot of these guys are just musicians, and they pay money to put it in the hands of accountants and respectable people, you would think, to do the right thing. But unfortunately, in the 70s, a lot of this, a lot of them weren't straight shooters. Anyway, back to the list. I'm going to go with a bit more of a modern, in the sense of Aerosmith in the 80s, and I'm going to pick Love in an Elevator. I think this is a really cheeky song. It's got a lot of chuzzbar. It's got a groove to it. Joe Perry's got a nice little guitar line. It's a tasty lyric. I've always thought that David Lee Roth, when he heard this song, would think, oh, this is the sort of song I could be writing. Be a little bit jealous, because it's got that David Lee Roth, nice turn of double entendres, and I think Steve Tyler's right up there with David Lee Roth, where they can make a sex lyric clever, not crass, and make it cheeky and humorous. So he's the master of the double entendres, I think.
He is,
Mr.
For
Stephen
sure.
Tyler.
Yeah, and I learned more about the birds and the bees from him, and just through his double entendre.
Yeah.
Which will bring us to I'll talk about our next pick, but is this my number one coming up? All right. So Rocks is a perfect album. Any song on here, 3 for sure could make number one. If you would have talked to me, you might talk to me tomorrow and I'll say Rats in the Cellar, because I absolutely friggin' love that tune. But it's just a perfect album for me, nonstop. Lickin' the Promise is another great tune, the guitar solos. But here's a story. I sang Lickin' a Promise to this girl I liked in 8th grade, and she never talked to me ever again. Like in high school or anything. Like I ran into her at a bar after college, and she still wouldn't talk to me because I sang Lickin' a Promise. Because maybe there's not as much double entendre. It's pretty much he's saying he's giving the ladies a lick and a promise, But it's a great tune. The chord progressions are great. But you know what? I was thinking all day today, what am I going to pick as my number one? Back in the Saddle is a perfect lead to a perfect album. And one of the reasons I absolutely love this is my number one song, Back in the Saddle. It's overplayed, but it's still brilliant. I absolutely love the fact that on this album, and especially this song, all the guys play different instruments. You got Joe Perry playing a 6-string bass. Then you have Brad Whitford playing all the lead guitar. And Tom Hamilton's playing regular bass along with the 6-string. And the singing by Steven is on another level. I think they don't play it all the time live, I think, because maybe it fries his voice. I don't know. But it's just a beautiful song. I absolutely love it. It's a perfect song on a perfect album. So I'm going to have to go Back in the Saddle. And I never get tired of it. And I would use it as, when I was feeling down and making a comeback, that would be my theme song. I'm back in the saddle again, right? So that's not what it's about, apparently, but that's what it meant for me.
Absolutely, you make what you want of a lot
exactly.
of lyrics.
I think there's a lot of double entendre in the lyrics there, but the 6-string bass is just brilliant. It just is. Yeah. And he didn't play it live until after I think during Pump, he brought out a 6-string bass because when they would play it live on guitar, it was weak. Yeah. But when he plays it live with actually playing a 6-string bass, then it has balls.
Yeah, 100%. That's my pick as well, mate. So I'm not doing a copycat. So we've got two that we synced up with. I just love it. It's got so much confidence, and he's going, "I'm back." I love it. It's a riff that bolts you to the floor. It's catchy as hell. And I always found that Aerosmith have got a little bit of R&B, a little bit of groove. They're all so in the pocket.
Definitely.
And, they're more, I think out of all those hard rock bands, they had more groove than most of the hard rock bands out there in the day. And that's what I like. They swing and there's groove.
I'm thinking about Steven Tyler's book, which wasn't that great, but he talks about Back in the Saddle. He has I believe he had a boot glued to a board with bells on it, and he's stomping throughout the song too. There's so much going on in this song. It's just it's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. And you got the whip, Yeah.
It's the whip. Perfect hard rock song. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, Joe. So we've picked 5 each, got a lot of similarities. Let's bring it to this year. So the news that they decided to call it a day. I wanted to just catch up with you and just get your thoughts as an Uber fan. You've always said that Aerosmith is your favorite band.
Well, the first,
What are your feelings about it? What are your feelings?
I was surprised. I thought they would go on like the Stones. But in hindsight, I'm not that surprised. I'm surprised it was Steven, honestly. And I still wonder if there's something else going on there. But I've seen them at least 30 times. I mean, I went off the rails seeing them because when they cleaned their act up somewhat after Permanent Vacation, as a live act, they became outstanding. And they would always throw us diehards a bone. They would play Lord of the Thighs, or they would play Rats in the Cellar. I'd be the only guy cheering, and then they play Don't Want to Miss a Thing, and everybody else would be losing it, and I'd be sitting down going, this song blows. But Chris Shiflett from the Foo Fighters has a YouTube interview where it's Shifley or something, and he talks to his guitar heroes. And he did an episode with Brad Whitford, and on that episode, I was like, these guys are super old. And Brad Whitford was struggling. Now, his son, I wanted to tell you, the reason I wore this shirt, I saw these guys in September a day before all the hurricane hit the fan. So Tonic, the 90s band Tonic, opened up. And they have this guitar player, and he is shredding. And I'm like, I do not remember Tonic having a guitarist this great. And I'm like, he looks kind of familiar. And then they went into Sweet Emotion, a perfect version of it. It was Graham Whitford. It was Brad Whitford's son, who is an amazing guitar player, and he was touring with them on this leg of the tour. But he has a couple other bands that he's in, Tyler Brandt and something. He's an amazing guitar player. But Brad, these guys are getting old, but Joe Perry had that solo show in, a handful of solo shows in 2023, and they were out of this world. He had a great backing band. He had Gary Sharon singing, and it was phenomenal. One of the best Aerosmith performances I've seen in a long time. But it took me by a bit of surprise. I had tickets for the Tampa show that was canceled, and I bought tickets for Louisville because I want to see them early if this falls off the rails again. And they canceled everything. But I know Stevens had throat surgery and other issues. I don't know. I'm kind of surprised. I wouldn't be opposed. See, I'd like your take on this. Aerosmith, there's like 2 or 3 levels of bands. Like the Stones, they can't tour without Mick and Keith, right? Where Foghat can continue with just their drummer and a bunch of, right? So there's different levels. And Aerosmith isn't that, because I'm thinking, if Aerosmith had Gary Sharon, don't kill me, Van Halen fans, but I'm telling you, he was great. Gary Sharon, and they got Brad Whitford's son on guitar, I'd be all in. I'd have front row if they played a set of Aerosmith. So it would be phenomenal. But the last time I saw them live was 2019 at their residency in Las Vegas. And it was a Vegas-y show. It was a little too perfect, but they played some great tunes. They played Rats in the Cellar. I lost my shit when they played Rats in the Cellar, and everybody was just sitting down. I was yelling at people. Next song was I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Everybody lost their shit. And I'm like, oh God. But at least they played a song for me. But that's the last time I saw them. And I thought they would continue on like the Rolling Stones, honestly. And I'm very surprised. I'm somewhat surprised this happened. And I have a feeling that there might be other issues there. I don't know if it's just him blowing out his voice, or I don't know, but
even an album.
Yeah, but Joe Perry had that heart attack with playing with, he plays that band with Alice Cooper and Johnny Depp, and tours with them, and he had the heart issues. He came back on fire in 2023, and that was pretty much him tuning up for the big tour, and yeah, they canceled it. They played some great dates in the Northeast. Melissa might have gone to one of the opening ones. I have to ask her, but and then they just canceled their shows. They said it would be rescheduled, and they canceled it altogether and said they're not touring anymore. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. It just goes to show a lot of our rock heroes are aging. And I saw that photo with you meeting Joe, and I actually was quite surprised how frail he looked.
I was taken aback. I walked in because he was one of my heroes, and I saw him at a book signing maybe 8 years before that, and he looked healthier than that. When I walked in, I was like, I kind of gasped because he looked sickly, but he was super nice and he put on a great show. And yeah.
Well, mate, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Hey, Joe, I've got to edit. I've got these construction people working next door, so I might have to wrap this up. So, but right. I'll edit it through. Joe, it's wonderful to have you on the show talking about your recollections of Aerosmith. You're a valuable member of Rock Daydream Nation, and plenty more shows that we'll cover. And I really appreciate your 5 picks for Aerosmith. So,
Peter, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for keeping in touch with me through all my travails. It meant a lot to me. So anytime you need me, if I'm available, I'm there for you, my friend.
I think there's a show or two we've got you earmarked for coming soon. So I won't give anything away, but coming soon. So
yeah, please thanks for keeping in touch, and thanks for the emails. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Rock Daydream Nation, tell us what you think of Aerosmith. Please like and subscribe. Click the bell. Give us a like. And plenty of shows coming up soon. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.